Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. I am your host, Chris White, and this is the live program for pre-sales professionals and pre-sales leaders that is by design, unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. And I'm delighted to welcome this week's guest, Mr. David Ledger. He is the RVP of Solutions Engineering for Seismic in EMEA. He's also a member, in fact, an ambassador of the PreSales Collective, just announced or named earlier this year. And David, by the way, is it solution engineering or sales engineering at Seismic? How do you
contentious topic, but yeah, at Seismic it's sales engineering.
It's sales engineering. So
yeah.
RVP of SE. I'll just say that. David, welcome, sir. Thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very well, Chris. Thank you very much for having me on. I'm very excited to do this. I've never done a live stream before, so it's pretty exciting. And yeah, obviously very happy to be on with yourself, one of my favorite pre-sales book authors. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, thank you very much, and delighted to have you here. Now, David, I introduced you briefly, but in the unlikely event that anybody who may join us or may listen after the fact doesn't know who you are, do you mind taking a minute and introducing yourself a little bit more broadly?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'm David. As you said, the RVP of Sales Engineering at Seismic for EMEA. I've been in sales engineering for probably about 8 years or 9 years. I'm originally from a place in the UK called the Wirral, which is near Liverpool. But I currently live in London, and yeah, I've been at Seismic for probably 3.5 years. Started when we were in Europe. We all 10 of us fitted in a room, probably no bigger than this one I'm sitting in right now. And then there's 150 people plus now in Europe, and the growth's been amazing, and I've loved every minute of it from the seat of pre-sales.
Yeah. And am I correct? One of my friends and co-authors, if I can use that term, Tim Brahm is a colleague of yours now.
That's correct. Yeah. I believe he's helped you out with the translation of the book. So yeah, great. He's a very smart guy. Not only can he do the day job, but he can translate a book on the side as well, which is pretty interesting. Yeah.
Indeed. Well, Tim, if you happen to be joining us, we of course welcome you to say hello, and anybody else who may be joining, and I'll pause a time or two, but we can't see you out there if you're with us. So if you care to chime in and say hello, of course, ask myself or David a question, please do so. Now, David, you mentioned that you've been in pre-sales for 8 or 9 years. And I always find it interesting to hear of people's journey to pre-sales, because I think we all sort of have a different and in some cases circuitous path into pre-sales. What was your path, and what is your story on how you got into and found this role called pre-sales?
Yeah, it's a good question for any pre-sales professional, because a lot of people actually decide that they want to be in pre-sales. I don't think. Yeah. I mean, I think that the work the PreSales Collective is doing now is actually raising the visibility of the profession as something that, like, a graduate, for instance, would want to do. But a lot of people find their way into it through lots of different routes. So I graduated in 2011. I have a degree in maths for my sins, and I decided that I wanted to do something, I don't know, kind of technical, but like the world of academia was definitely behind me. And so I got a graduate job at a fintech company called Capital IQ, which is now part of S&P Global. It got acquired and it's part of this big financial services company. And it was kind of like a graduate scheme where you ostensibly do like a customer support job, and at the same time they sort of train you to be an account manager or to be an account executive and move up through the ranks. And then within the sales team, there was this smaller group of specialists who would help the sales team sell like the more technical products that they offered. Yeah. And I got introduced to them and ended up applying to join that group instead of the regular role, which was probably to go into like a junior sales role or an account management role. Yeah. And I genuinely thought at the time that this was a role that this team had been created specifically by S&P as a way to sell their more technical products. I genuinely thought this was a unique situation in their sales team. Yeah. And only after I joined the team that I really realized that actually, okay, no, there is actually an industry of people who do this for a living. Right. So that opened my eyes a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into it, is just fell into it because it was a job that was a little outside the norm, but seemed to have all the right elements that I was looking for.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So coming out of university in 2011, which by the way makes me feel very old. I have to thank you for that. So you come out of university, you get a role in a customer success role with a fintech company, and it's really it's designed to be sort of a bit of a stepping stone for an account executive, for a sales position.
Exactly.
And then you did somebody invite you or encourage you to apply for this specialist role? Is that sort of how that was put on your radar?
Yeah, exactly. I think at that time they had a kind of a specialist program a little bit where people would get invited to different areas of the business and different departments. Like some people might take a 1 day a week in marketing, or maybe they take a day a week working in the sales team or doing something else. And yeah, it was just a little sort of specialist interest, I guess. Kind of got into it, learned about the world of databases and APIs, and I was already, I'm already kind of a technically minded person. I mean, I did a degree in maths. I like to figure out how things work. I kind of understand technology and like technology, so it was always an interest for me. And then I decided, well, let's do this full time, see where this goes. And at the time, I really honestly did not acknowledge it as sales engineering or as a career to get into. It was just something interesting that I thought I could gain some more experience in.
Yeah. Well, it's so ironic to me that when you got into that, when you found yourself into that position, you thought it was unique to your company.
Yeah.
You didn't realize that actually, other people doing, in essence, the same role at virtually every other software company. At what point did that sort of become a little bit more obvious to us? At what point did you sort of, poke your head up and say, oh, I guess there's other people that do this too?
Yeah, well, I thought, they want to sell the, as we were at the time, they were trying to sell these more technical data products. And I thought that they just thought, well, in order to sell this stuff, we're going to need people who understand how to talk about this. And I thought that they just hired those people just for that reason. But actually, you realize that there's a lot of transferable skills there. And it's not just the specific product knowledge. Of course, it's the presentability, it's the technical knowledge, it's the industry knowledge of the ecosystem that all of that lives in. So it took me a few months, but I pretty soon realized, there's actually something to this a little bit more than that. But still, I stayed there in that team for over 3 years. So it's not like I suddenly woke up and was like, oh, maybe I should get out of it. I still learned my craft in that team, but definitely having a conscious idea that there was something else outside of it.
Yeah. Other than learning the technology, the databases, the APIs and all that, were there other things that, as you reflect on that time, that were maybe challenging for you to pick up, or things that you realize skills that you realize that you really needed to develop in order to elevate your results and your performance?
So, good question. Yeah. I think one of the things that I was definitely guilty of, and I think a lot of new pre-sales people are guilty of, especially if they work in quite a in a technical product or in a company selling a very technical product, is you learn so much about the area, about the product, about the technology. When you get into a sales meeting context, when somebody asks you a question, you go on for 10 minutes just talking about the answer, all this stuff, all this information, all these technical pieces of information. And that's what I did when I first started. And it was pretty terrible, right? The biggest skill that I think I learned in those early days is how to explain something quite technical in quite a simple way, and explain things in a concise way that the person on the other side of the table, literal table, then metaphorical virtual table now, like would understand and would grasp. That's the biggest skill that I think I learned there. And it's such a key skill for pre-sales, because sometimes you're not talking to somebody who's got expertise in what you're talking about, but they still need to grasp it because you still need to sell it to them. So they have to understand what they're talking about. And I think Absolutely. That's a big skill I learned in the early days. It's a big mistake a lot of early stage pre-sales people make, I think, is like brain dumping everything you know rather than picking out what you really need to tell somebody.
Honestly, I think it's one of the biggest mistakes we all make. And David, I know you've read the book. I talked about this. I think even in the prelude, I said that I had been invited in to speak, at this event. It was like sort of the first big event I'd been invited to speak to. And I bumped into the sales manager afterwards and asked him how he thought I did. And he said, I don't think anybody in that room had any idea what you were talking about. And I was totally flabbergasted. Yeah. By the way, Paul Flynn is with us. Paul, nice to see you. He's a relatively new SE, he says. Comes from a consulting background. Any tips or tricks would be appreciated. He does mention the 6 habits. I'm glad you're enjoying that, Paul. Certainly, I think David just shared a good one, which is we do have a tendency to do a brain dump. We do have a tendency, and sometimes we love the opportunity to tell people share with people everything we know about ourselves and our solutions, right? Were there any other things for you, David, that were, particularly sort of significant as you evolved those first 3 years, other than learning how to make the complex simple, answer maybe, with less detail? Anything else in particular stand out?
Yeah, good question. If I look back at all, those early years, and also, Seismic and everywhere in between, I guess, one thing that you have to realize as a sales engineer, selling is like a team sport. It's a big cliche, everybody says selling is a team sport, but your partnership with the other colleagues you have in the sales team is going to be extremely crucial. So that's something that you have to understand as well. You're not like a lone ranger out there just giving a presentation and then walking away with the customer in awe of your skills, and then, the deal still has to get done after that, So yeah. I definitely think that a tip I would have is really try to get to know and understand the strengths and weaknesses of the people in the sales team around you, and find a way to work with them. Find a way to work with them in a collaborative, in a kind of in an efficient way as well, so that you are part of a team. You're not just a lone ranger out there. Most B2B sales teams are, 4, 5, 6 people in total. Once you figure out that you've had help from like the inside sales rep, the account executive, the sales engineer, there's probably a specialist in there at some point, and you've got somebody to scope the project. And, by the time that the deal's done, there's 6 or 7 people who've really helped out, and you need to have relationships with all those people. So that would be a big tip for me, is not just you're concentrating on your own subject matter expertise, but your relationships with the people that you're going to be doing the deals with.
Yeah, and it's such an important point, and it's almost it's almost a bit of an oxymoron, if I can use that term, in that we are, quote, in that role we're an individual contributor, right? And there are times that the spotlight's on us, and we need to perform in that moment, right? But the truth is, as you said, sales is a team sport, right? And I think of it like baseball, right? In baseball, there's a lot of individual performance, and we pay attention to individual stats and all that. But at the end of the day, we win as a team, right? And we're only as good as the team is as a whole. So I think, and the more we realize that it's actually not about me, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'll seeing as I'm English, I'll use the analogy of cricket rather than baseball, but it's the same idea. That 50% of the game, you're in the field with the rest of the team, but there is going to be a moment where you're going to stand there with the bat and the guy's going to throw the ball at you, and you have to perform in that moment, right? And it's quite a good analogy, actually, to think about it that way.
Yeah. Well, in fact, I'll take it a half a step further. I did a little bit of homework on cricket because I do work with some, nice. And I think I wrote an article, as a no hitter in baseball, does the pitcher deserve all the credit? Well, in a hat trick, if a bowler throws a hat trick in cricket, if he or she deserve all the credit? And the answer, of course, is no, right? Where would he be without his or her
team? Yeah.
Right. So it's a very similar analogy. Let's take the conversation a step further. So you've been in pre-sales, say, for about 3 years. At what point did you make the step into management?
Probably I've been in that role for a couple of years. There was an opportunity to start managing the team. So that was fantastic. I had a great team there, recruited some excellent people. We were still a small and mighty team. I'd say there was about 6 of us. And we actually had to support like a sales team of like 100 people.
Wow.
But it was a bit of it sounds worse than it was because not all of the salespeople actively sold these products that we were in. So really, the ratio wasn't like that. But yeah, and I really enjoyed it. Obviously, I enjoy coaching people. I enjoy trying to bring the team together to be kind of more than the sum of its parts. And yeah, it was something I really enjoyed, really loved, and all the people in that team, they really taught me a lot as well about how to be a good manager. So I really, really appreciated that time.
Yeah. And I'll ask a similar question. When you made that step in your career, was there anything in particular that you discovered that you had to either learn, change about the way you were approaching the role and the job?
Yeah, I don't know how this goes for other people who moved from being an individual contributor to being a manager, but the biggest realization I had to have is that you can't kind of improve things by just like doing the work for people. So you can't just jump in and be like, oh, let me just do that for you like this. Let me show you that. I'll just do it like this. Because you end up just doing that all the time. Your effect is now in the aggregate. You have to think about your effect in the aggregate of bringing everybody up a little bit rather than just diving in on people's deals or diving in on people's meetings and being like, oh, actually, let me show you. I'll just do it like this. Because that's just wholly unscalable. And actually, it doesn't really help the people in your team get better if you just sort of jump in and try and do it for them. Your effect is in the aggregate. So you have to try and think about initiatives and ways of working that are going to bring everybody up rather than just like, that could be a process improvement, that could be training, that could be coaching. It could be a lot of things, but you have to try and bring everybody up rather than just, you can't act like a ultra individual contributor, basically. It's just not going to work.
Yeah. You can't become, I've heard it called the super SE, right? You can't become the super SE. Now, were there any?
If you want to do that, there are roles in the industry that exist, right? You can go, I think some of the big tech companies have like black belts and masters, and there's these individual contributor tracks that go way up in terms of knowledge and skill.
Absolutely.
But it's not a management job. It's definitely still an individual contributor job.
Yeah, exactly. And are there any techniques in specific or techniques in particular that you developed over the years that helped you change that approach and helped you, rather than going in and doing and solving and fixing, help you really create and give your team the opportunity to sort of learn for themselves and solve for themselves?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say the first thing you have to change is like you are now, if you become a manager, then usually you have a lot more control over your calendar now. One of the things about being an individual contributor is, you are kind of at the behest of when the client wants to do the meetings, when the sales people do the meetings. But when you're a manager, you somehow have this more free time. So try and put that time to good use and think of things that your team need. Listen to the people in the team and try to take their issues off them. Try to take the issues off them, right? So is there a process which is particularly annoying or difficult or is wasting their time? Is there like duplicative work they have to do that you could get rid of? Is there like some problem with like qualification, that the people are passing them things which are terribly badly qualified. Could you go and deal with that somehow? Basically what an individual contributor wants their manager to do is to take the problems that they're struggling with, that are wasting all their time, just take that off their plate and just bring it somewhere else, like onto them, basically, so they can just carry on doing what they're doing. So find ways to do that, and that could be, so many things, but, that's the approach I think you should have. Like, what are they struggling with? Let me take that off their plate, put it somewhere else.
Removing barriers, right? And, taking unnecessary loads off of them, right? And then equipping them with the whether that's the resources, right? The opportunities they need, et cetera. So now at what point, because now as an RVP, I assume that you have, or is it safe to assume that you now have people who manage people reporting to you? Is that the correct assumption?
Nearly, but not quite. We're nearly at that scale, but we're not quite at that scale. So we will be soon at Seismic, which is going to be, again, another challenge, like, for me to understand how to deal with that arena. But currently everybody's still a direct report of mine, but we are getting to a scale where that's not going to be sustainable. Even maybe by the end of this year. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to go.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully. So I may be inclined to invite you back next year. You've elevated to that point, and I'll invite you to share some of the new challenges and some of the lessons you've learned on that part of your journey.
And you'll have to let me know. You'll have to let me know if you have anyone on who's a director and has multiple layers of management beneath them, because I'd love to hear some of those lessons as well. Definitely.
I most certainly will, and I've actually had quite a few, so I may send you a few.
Sure, absolutely.
By the way, David, let me just press our own pause button, folks. I'm speaking with David Ledger, RVP of SEs in EMEA for Seismic. And by all means, if you care to invite, if you care to ask him a question, ask me a question, just say hello. I invite you to do so. David, let me shift gears on you ever so slightly. Something that's always been very interesting to me, and particularly as I work with different organizations, one of the things I ask them is, who are you selling to? What role or what department within a typical organization are you selling to? Because I think that really changes the role from a little bit to dramatically. And in my experience, when I was in the field, I was selling to IT and enterprise architects. Right? It was a very technical sale, whereas you, I'm guessing, sell more to sales and marketing type folks. Are there unique challenges because that's the typical market or individual that you're talking to?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We are selling an enablement SaaS platform, which is specifically designed for go-to-market teams, and so we are typically selling to sales leaders and marketing leaders and sales enablement leaders. They have their budgets themselves now. And it definitely provides certain kind of challenges. I'd say it's also quite rewarding in a way. I think doing a sale to what you might call like a line of business rather than an IT sale is quite different. The need to sell on value and usability is never higher than when you're in that arena, because if you're trying to explain to a sales leader how this technology is going to make their people more efficient, it has to be so obvious what the value is. Otherwise, they're going to be like, well, I'm not going to go digging for the value. Like, it just has to be so clear. So that's definitely something. I mean, on the flip side, you usually know where you stand, and there's no kind of nonsense. People let you know pretty quickly on a demo if you're in the right area or not, which is quite good, I suppose. You get the feedback straight away. But I think the main thing is telling a good story, painting a good picture of how the solution is going to help them, and showing them the value straight away, first meeting. Really.
And why is it that you get that feedback so quickly? Do you think it's because you're selling to salespeople, so they understand your predicament, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, in a way.
They're like, look, I don't want to mislead you. I understand what you're trying to do. Let me just provide you some feedback so there's no misleading, information
like
here.
so for instance, I mean, this is getting into general sales rather than sales engineering, but like, you obviously would ask about timelines, about budgets, about executive sponsorship, these type of things as like a deal qualification. If you're selling to a sales leader, you very rarely get pushback on why are you asking that. Okay, some maybe even sometimes, but if we're having a conversation with like a VP of sales or a CRO, they're asking their people to ask that all the time anyway. So it's not like we're asking for something crazy.
Right.
Maybe more on the marketing side, you do sometimes get that. But I mean, to be honest, the kind of explosion of MarTech in the last 10 to 15 years, a lot of people in marketing are actually very accomplished in, if I can say that, at buying technology. They have big budgets. They understand their own tech landscape very well. There are MarTech architects that we work with as part of this, right? Who understand all the other things that they're doing and have a say. So you very rarely get that sort of like, okay, why are you asking me about whether I have a budget for this? This is because that's how they're taught like to do as well, right?
Yeah. I would think that they would be much more patient and almost tolerant or forgiving to a certain degree because they understand the role. I am curious, do you find that pre-sales leaders or maybe pre-sales enablement people are getting more involved in the decision-making process? Are you starting to see the involvement of pre-sales folks in your typical sales engagement?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, in for our product specifically, I would say a pre-sales leader is an influencer rather than a decision maker, but they're definitely coming to the table. We definitely have them on meetings, and then that's a whole another like inception level where you're doing a demo to a pre-sales leader, because then they're not just critiquing you on the quality of your product, they're actually critiquing you on the quality of your own demo, like just your general demo skills. And are you committing any demo crimes and various things like that, right? So they're even critiquing you on that as much as the concept of your product, which is pretty fun. So that's definitely a dynamic. I'd say they're coming to the table. They're more of an influencer rather than a buyer, but they, like I said before, they have this great partnership in a lot of companies with pre-sales and sales. So if salespeople and the marketing team are thinking of buying this enablement technology, they're like, well, we need to get pre-sales to have a voice in that. And a lot of our customers and prospects actually think, well, we should also get customer success to have a look at this as well, because it's really for all go-to-market customer-facing people, to be honest. It makes for a very interesting cast of characters, definitely.
I'm sincerely curious, when you do have pre-sales leaders involved in some of your sales presentations, demonstrations, is there anything in particular that they are usually looking for?
That's interesting. I mean, aside from the fact that you're doing a good job of your demo, are they looking for anything in particular? I guess anything that speaks to efficiency, like there's a number of things that we have in our platform that would make somebody more efficient, better use of their time. Pre-sales are very often time constrained, time poor people because there's always more to do, and you're always being asked by more and more people to take on more things. So anything that we can do that brings efficiency to their team, if we can say, look, we could get you even an hour, 2 hours back in your week if you adopted this technology, they're going to really resonate with that, because it's a big thing for them. Constraints, resource constraints. In terms of how many people they have.
Well, and it's interesting to me. I don't even know if I mentioned to you, I've been doing this market study on tools targeting the pre-sales leader and the pre-sales community. and there's demo automation tools. There's what we're calling sort of pre-sales operations management oversight, right? There's IC enablement, aka opportunity management. And it's interesting. It's been interesting to me to sort of get to understand that part of the market. And so you've got your space of sales enablement over here, and then I think pre-sales enablement is sort of somewhere over here. But it's interesting to see these tools evolve. You mentioned demo etiquette, and when you're actually presenting, particularly to other pre-sales professionals, pre-sales leaders. Is there anything, for anybody who may be listening, is there anything in particular that you and your team are particularly careful about when it comes to demo etiquette when demonstrating to sales professionals and pre-sales professionals?
Good question. I think it's the classic like so what test, isn't it? One of the guys on my team, James, told me that when he was at NetSuite or Oracle, they used to run these demo workshops where 5 or 6 SEs would get in a room and somebody would do the demo that they were proposing to do, like maybe just 10-15 minutes of it, and they all had like a little paddle that has so what like written on it. So if they were ever showing something and it wasn't clear like why you were showing that, they just pull up their paddle and be like, so what? And I think that's the main. If you're demoing to another sales engineer, they are very finely tuned into the so what, into the why are you showing this to me? Like, I'm not, maybe because I'm a pre-sales person, I'm interested in just technology generally. So I might be like curious about how something was built, or how something works, or what it does. But I can quickly detect if there's no reason for you to be showing me this, right? Like that's the classic like so what acid test is, I think, the best if you have to demonstrate something to other pre-sales people. Yeah.
No, I absolutely love that, and I just love the visual of the paddle. In fact, it almost makes me want to create a paddle with like a little flip chart, right? With a few different words, or a few different things, like too much, too little, time for a break,
Make sure you're checking back with your audience. Like a little reminder, you haven't asked a question of your audience for like 7 or 8 minutes. Like maybe it's time to check back, those kind of things as well.
Exactly. I mean, I tell the folks that I work with, if I hear myself talking for more than 2 to 3 minutes or 3 to 4 minutes, like I just need to take a pause, So it's such a good reminder. In fact, speaking of pauses, I'll push our own pause again. Folks, I'm speaking with David Ledger. He's the RVP of Sales Engineering with Seismic and EMEA. Again, we can't see you. If you want to say hello, if you care to ask any questions, please feel free to do so. And David, just moving on. So, we talked about sort of your experience. You found this role that you thought was unique to the company you were working with at the time, discovered that, oh my goodness, this is a real profession, decided to take the next step, got into management. Obviously, you've been with sales enablement. I know one of the things that we talked about sort of, in our, check-in last week was this idea of sort of elevating the approach from product to solution and elevating the message, the delivery, et cetera. What are some of the lessons that you all have learned in what it takes to sort of elevate the narrative and the conversation from product to solution selling?
Yeah, it's a very interesting journey, I think, and a journey that we're definitely still on at Seismic. When I joined, 3.5 years ago, there was a product called Seismic, and it was still a pretty deep product. Like there was still a lot of applications, lots of use cases. You could configure it in lots of different ways, but generally speaking, you could really become a true expert. And there's always. I always hate to say that because there's always more to know, isn't there? But you could really get to a level where you know the product completely inside and out. But over the last 3.5 years, we've had significant organic growth in the product. The product's expanded vastly. in terms of the things it can do. And we've also acquired companies and then integrated their technology. So, for instance, we never had a social selling tool. We do now. We never used to have a learning and development and onboarding program. We do now, and that's all part of the solution. Yeah. So, from an individual contributor basis, it becomes much harder to get to that mastery. And you can definitely still get there, but it takes a lot longer. Certainly, way longer than any normal onboarding program. So the challenge is you can't just hire somebody, keep them on the bench for a year while they get this high level of mastery and then put them in the field. They have to be productive faster than that. So then it's about, okay, what is the level of knowledge that I need to know about everything in order to tell a good story, in order to understand the use cases, understand the pains that my customers are having, and try to weave that together. Especially because the product is not just one product. It's obviously you can buy multiple modules, multiple SKUs to fit your requirements, and it's part of the skill of the sales engineer to actually put that together now. So here's a list of things that we're having a challenge with. Okay, here's the 2.5 things that we do which will solve that, and presenting that in a cohesive way, that becomes a whole skill in itself, I would say, as well.
Yeah. Well, what I hear you saying there is that when the product set or when the portfolio is maybe a little bit narrower, a little bit smaller, you can be the foremost expert in, quote, how everything works, and you can demonstrate all those individual sort of pieces. As the portfolio is grown through organic growth and through acquisition, it's as important, if not more important, to know what each of the pieces do. You may not know exactly how all of them do everything, but you at least need to know what does what, right? Which pieces solve what parts of the problem, right? And to your point, assembling the right components for the right scenario is as important as being able to demonstrate all the individual capabilities. Is that a fair interpretation of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the archetypal, classic example of the last 20 years is Salesforce, right? Their beachhead was CRM. They thought that CRM was a broken system and they were going to redesign it, and they did a great job. And then now Salesforce, I've never been a sales engineer at Salesforce, so maybe some people who are listening to this are sales engineers at Salesforce, but I very much doubt that you're a master in everything that Salesforce does, because there is a huge amount. But it's about understanding in your area, what are people struggling with, what are your customers struggling with, your prospects struggling with, and how can we put together a solution that will help them. That's a fundamentally different skill than knowing CRM inside out, right? Definitely.
David, incidentally, we have a friend, a question from my good friend Ramsey Marjaba. Ramsey, thank you for joining. Good to see you, my friend. So his question is actually an interesting one. So do you get to use your own product, quote, as a customer? I'm assuming you guys drink your own Kool-Aid, as we like to say.
We do.
You have to go through the sales process to buy, but more importantly, and I think this is actually the interesting question, does using your product help you in the field? Does it help you with your selling motions?
So Ramsey, thanks. Good question. Yes, we definitely use our own product, and so we're kind of a customer of our own product. I actually find it amazing that when we have customer conferences, customers come with new use cases that we never thought of, and then we adopt them because we're like, oh, that's really good, we could do that. It's ironic sometimes that the company that develops the technology is not the best user of their own technology.
We don't have all the answers, for sure.
I think we're pretty good, but sometimes customers come with these use cases and we're like, wow, that's really cool, we never thought of that. We definitely use our own technology, and to your point, Chris, that definitely makes it easier to sell because you really understand what it does from a day-to-day basis, right? And And it also becomes more authentic in the sales cycle, I think, when, as much as possible, we could also use our own internal environment to do demos. So we're showcasing a particular thing that you can do in Seismic, and we use our own environment, then it becomes more authentic because people are like, well, they really believe it. They actually use it, right? I think that's quite a privileged position to be in. I'm not sure what percentage of the SaaS market is that way, but probably not many, not massive amounts. So that's interesting. To your question about did you have to go through the sales process to buy our own product? I guess not really. You come in on day one and you get given a login to our internal instance of Seismic. So you have to you just get on with it. You start using it. But we didn't really go through like a mystery shopper program or anything like that. That would have been quite fun actually. Although one thing I would say is when I joined Seismic, I scheduled to go for an interview, and I went on the website and started downloading a bunch of things, and obviously put a request a demo form in, and then the inside sales rep got back to me and was like, "Oh, this is great! Like we've been wanting to target S&P for ages." And I was like, "I'm really sorry, but actually I'm coming for an interview. I'm not really." But how about we do this? I'll just trade you information. So I will trade you like the whole org chart, basically, if you give me a quick demo and show me more about the product. So that was a really useful tip. The request a demo form is pretty great if you're going for an interview. I would put it in and get some more information as much as you can, and trade your company's intel as a prospect is a good way to do it.
That is a great. If people take no other tip away from this session, if you're interviewing, go and click the request a demo on the website.
And if you are interviewing for like a product-led growth company, one of these that you can just have a free trial online, I think the first interview question that should be asked is, have you got a free trial? Have you looked around? Because if you're an SE and you're not curious about what you're going to be selling, I think that's very weird, to be honest. I would say you should have gone and got the free trial and got the demo.
Yeah. Well, and something you just said, I think is worth repeating, and that is, if you're an SE and you're not curious, there's a problem. We have a problem, Houston. I mean, to me, curiosity is one of the superpowers of the best SEs, right? Like we should always be curious, not only about our own technology, the problems that we solve, but our customers, right? And what is their current situation? What are they trying to accomplish, right?
Yeah, and genuine curiosity as well. I mean, you can coach curiosity because you can coach people to ask the right questions and things. Right. But some people are just genuinely like, they'll just talk to their prospect for hours about their issues. And then you almost have to rein them in and say like, okay, you're just asking because you're interested now. You need to bring it back to like a business problem, please. But I'd rather have that issue than the issue of like, they're not curious about anything. They don't care. Like that's what
Absolutely. So well said. By the way, someone I know that you've gotten to know pretty well, Steve Bullington, has joined us. I think he was answering your question about whether or not Salesforce SEs know everything there is to know about the platform. I suspect he's saying absolutely not. Steve, good to see you if you're still with
us. Well, I know Steve runs the Scout Academy, so I know he helps run the Scout Academy. So if he's saying that you don't have to do everything, then we're probably on pretty firm ground there.
Indeed, and I have to give a shout out to Steve. He reached out to me, I think in November, December, after I had after I had published the book rather, and said, "Hey Chris, I run this program with Salesforce and discovered your book and really like it and would love to use it as part of the program." And that was actually one of the things that gave me the confidence to just go out on my own and do this on my own. So, Steve, again, good to see you, my friend. I hold you in very high regard. And Ramsey just chimed in, said that's amazing. I'm not sure what he's referring to. My guess is maybe the story you gave about the downloading or requesting the download. David, you first of all, if you can believe it, we've already been at this for about 45 minutes.
Yeah, I know, isn't it? That's crazy.
You've been unbelievably with your time. I am inclined to ask you one more question around this whole notion of solution selling over products. And I do think it's very interesting that the thing that you mentioned really is a bit of an eye opener for me, that if you're an organization like a Salesforce, like an SAP, I mean, from the sounds of it, even Seismic, where the portfolio is getting wider, there's more things, you're less of a deep expert in one area, and you need to be able to, sort of have multiple, speak multiple languages, as I like to say. But you also mentioned product-led growth. And I'm curious if you have an opinion, can solution selling and product-led growth, can those two concepts sort of co-mingle and coexist for a given organization?
That is a really interesting question. I mean, I'm genuinely very curious about the rise of like product-led growth as a category. I think it's not really that new. I mean, I think people have been doing it for a long time. But product-led growth doesn't just mean a free trial. There's a whole kind of go-to-market motion that needs to go behind a company that's doing that. That's a bit different to a traditional like B2B SaaS model. Now, I don't have a huge amount of expertise in that area, but I do think there's probably a place for solution selling in that area. I mean, the way I understand it is like, you might look at an enterprise and 3 or 4 different teams in that enterprise have independently signed up for your product. And what are they doing? these three or 4 different teams, they might be using it for the same thing. They might be using it for different things. They might be in different regions. And maybe as an SE, it's your job to connect all of that up and come up with a cohesive story about why they need to go and do a bigger rollout of your technology, because it would, leverage efficiencies between all these different things that they're doing. I think that's what I think it is. I would love to hear more from people who are actually in those kind of worlds, but I think it sounds very interesting for sure.
Well, and it's interesting, and the reason I asked, frankly, is that this is something that I'm still giving a lot of thought to. I've had sort of the product-led growth debate with a number of people. Does product-led growth mean, or does it only apply to those companies that have a product that sort of fits in a reasonably narrow, niche, sort of like, from the sounds of it, what Seismic was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, right? I'll submit that the answer that I'm getting from a lot of people, or what I'm hearing from a lot of people, is the rise of demo automation, whether that's Reprise, Novatic, certainly Consensus has been out for a while. Demo Stack, Demo Easel, there's quite a Walnut. Would argue that with their tools, you can create usable, quote, demo assets, right, that are self-service, and your customers can experience the customer, so you can follow a product-led growth approach, even though you might have a very complex platform that if they were to do a download might get themselves into some trouble quickly, right?
Yeah, so, I think even if your product isn't lending itself particularly to like the product-led growth model of having free sign-ups and trials and all that sort of stuff, you have to understand that people's expectations have really changed quite a lot in terms of how much information they're able to gather before they ever speak to you, and how much of their decision-making process is done before they ever speak to you. So you need to think about and move in that direction. And like you said, self-service information is good. Even if it's like the first time you talk to somebody at that company, if that interaction is very tailored and very smart because of what they know about you, and they ask good questions and can instantly relate that back to something that you're interested in, that becomes really, really important. I don't think anybody's phoning up a SaaS company these days and is happy with a checklist of like 20 questions. I think that's just not the way that it works anymore fundamentally. So people's expectations have changed, and you have to try and move with them, even if your product is not really lending itself to that type of model.
Another quotable quote, David, people's expectations have changed. And let's even be more specific. Buyers' expectations have changed, and we have to move with them. We
talk at Seismic about this all the time. I mean, if you think about how your expectations have changed in your consumer life and how that bleeds into your business life, you can go on Amazon, you can look at a product, you can see related products, you can see reviews of that product, you can get multiple delivery options all on one screen. You can buy it, and it turns up, later that day or even the same day, which I'm still amazed that they can do this. It's quite crazy. But if you think that's the expectation you have in your consumer life, and then in your business life, it's going to be vastly different, I don't think so. I mean, you wouldn't treat a business purchase like a major software purchase in the same way, certainly, but your expectations about the access to information and the ability to find out things quickly is really changed, fundamentally changed.
Yeah, completely agree. And the more we as sellers change our thinking, right, change the way we approach every engagement, the better off.
And I think if we get it right, then there's definitely a space for SEs to become even more valuable, because you're not doing those unqualified harbor cruise tour, whatever you like to call it, kitchen cooks tour demos, that you need to master new skills, right? One of the things I really like the concept of, at least. I try to do it myself, but it's quite hard. It's like a discovery demo where you start out with an idea, even if it's fairly unqualified, but you can actually flex through the demo based on what people tell you, and you arrive at something quite tailored and quite custom quite quickly. That's a big skill that is needed in that type of scenario, I would say. It's an interesting area for sure.
As some people call it, the disco demo.
The disco demo, yeah.
I call it discovery in disguise.
Yeah.
You're showing something, but the purpose is really not to convince you of anything as much as really to get you up, talking and opening up. And if I hear something specific that, inspires me to pivot and turn and then show something else, of course, I'm ready to do so. So
absolutely.
I do think that is one of the, that may very well have become the most important skill of a sales engineer. In fact, I may be inspired to write a post about that. I think that's a good observation. David, as I said a moment ago, you've been unbelievably gracious with your time. I do have just a few quick questions, but before we get there, anything in closing? I know when you and I chatted briefly last week, you said something effective. Chris, this is honestly, it's like the best job in tech that nobody's ever heard of, and that is changing a little bit. Any final thoughts from you, just in specific to in specific regard to that notion that this role is the best job that people in many cases haven't heard of?
It's the best job in technology. It is. I mean, I don't know why people think it's not. It's kind of astounding to me. Like, honestly, again, there's a lot of people who are interested in joining the pre-sales team from within Seismic. So I do meet with quite a lot of people there, and people who are, external to Seismic. And if they're like, oh, I'm interested in this thing called sales engineering, I'll try to sit them down and explain why it's the best job in technology. And I think it's just got everything, hasn't it? I mean, it's got the customer facing skills. You become a good presenter. One of the things that I said to you in the prep we did for this is I've never done a live stream before. I don't really understand the format, but if somebody asks me, hey, do you want to spend an hour in an unscripted conversation talking about your job? And a lot of people would say, oh, I'm not sure about that. It sounds a bit tough. But if you're in pre-sales, you're going to be like, yeah, no problem. It's fine. And the reason is because you're a good presenter. You're in front of customers every day. And what other job do you have where you can combine that kind of skill with technical knowledge and interest in technology and deep understanding of that, matched with sales, which I think is a really thrilling career in itself. I mean, it's a great job. It's fantastic. And there's so many career paths within it. But also, if you then want to leave sales engineering at some point, people are definitely going to hire you because you've got all of those skills, right? So you can go into any area of the enterprise really after that. So yeah, I love it. And I love doing these kind of things to talk about that exact thing.
Fantastic. That little clip there may resurface on LinkedIn. That was such a good clip. Okay, very, very quickly, my lightning round, David. I call this tech sales advice. So we're gonna get a few pieces of advice. First of all, as you reflect on your career, was there any piece of advice in particular that you got that proved to be very valuable or highly valuable to you?
I don't. It's probably what we talked about at the top of the show. I don't know if it's a piece of advice that I got, but it's definitely one that kind of came over time, which is learn how to explain complex things in a simple way. That is just a great skill for anyone to have.
I absolutely love that. Usually my second question is there any piece of advice that you might give? But I'm going to assume that you just did that. So
I just chucked it out there. So yeah.
We're going to double down on that one. So then my final question for you is, if you could ask me one question, what might it be?
If you were to rewrite your book and somebody forced you to add a 7th habit, if I said, no, Chris, I'm your publisher, it can't be 6, it has to be 7, whatever, what would the additional habit be?
Very good question. I've been asked similar things before. And of course, sticking with the alliteration built into the framework, habit number 7 would be pursue. And what do I mean by pursue? One of the mistakes that I think we make is we go in, we give a good demonstration, and we sort of treat it like, okay, I did I did the demo, my job is over. Our job is not over until the deal is closed, right? We need to pursue the end game. What does that mean? It might mean supporting a proof of value, a proof of concept or a proof of value, right? It might mean reaching out to one of the technical principals and scheduling a follow-up conversation to ask some questions, right? It might mean, scheduling another meeting with the account executive to find out if there's anything else that we can do or can be done, right, to help them get it across the finish line. So that, to me, that's habit number. The habit that I didn't write about is to pursue the deal to close.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a very good one. I think it's you're judged on the same metrics. You probably judged specifically on closed business, and you should pursue, because if you don't, then you could be leaving opportunities on the table.
Exactly. So, very good question, David. And David, thank you so much for joining. Any closing thoughts, comments, observations? Where can people find you, reach out to you? Obviously, they can find you here on LinkedIn. Any parting words?
Yeah, look, Chris, thank you very much for having me on. This was a pretty interesting experience. Never done a live stream before, like I said, so that was very cool. Yes, I mean, LinkedIn, you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. Just I don't mind being DM'd on LinkedIn. It's absolutely fine. I'm pretty visible on there. So just find me there, connect with me, send me a message if you want to talk about anything we talked about or anything else, or why and on why pre-sales is the best job in technology.
Excellent. And of course, anyone in London or England, I'm sure, can reach out to you about PreSales Collective and getting involved. And
yes, indeed. A couple of plugs. There's a PreSales Collective meetup in London on April the 12th. So go and sign up for that if you're in London. And on April the 6th is the next installment of Steve Bullington and I's book club. So go ahead and register for that as well. That's a great initiative we haven't even spoken about, but a little plug at the end, that's fine. Go connect with me even on the PreSales Collective Slack channel. That's also fine. I don't mind that.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, folks, for those of you who stuck around, thank you so much. Or any of you who may have joined or caught the recording, David, thank you so much. Folks, if you like these shows, I encourage you to go to #TechSalesAdvice. Follow the hashtag and share it with folks you may know. David, hang around just for a minute. We'll chat after the fact. Folks, thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Be well all.